All right, everybody go ahead and find your seats. Wrap up conversations, please. We're going to get started here. We're going to continue our exploration of challenges and innovations in education and the arts. As we move into this next portion, I want to encourage everybody to listen for one idea that challenges what your assumptions might be, one partnership maybe that you hadn't yet considered, and one action that you feel you or your organization might be able to take within the next 90 days. We're going to kick off our next set of lightning speakers. First, we're going to welcome up Andrew Hanson to the stage. Andrew Hanson is the Senior Director of Employer Alignment at Strada Education Foundation. He leads research and strategic initiatives that strengthen the connection between education and opportunity in partnership with policymakers, educators, and employers. Please join me in welcoming Andrew to the stage to present on education.
All right. Good morning. Thank you to Drew and to the entire foundation team for having me. I would like to start with a quote. Parents are beginning to worry that college may be a commitment that they simply can't afford. They fear the curriculum isn't providing the education their children need for the world of work. Maybe that sounds familiar to some of you. And perhaps you saw a headline just like it this morning or within the past couple of weeks. But that quote is not from 2026 or even the past few years. It's actually from 1976, from a Newsweek story called Who Needs College? And so for 50 years, we've been stuck in this loop of having the kind of same conversations, reading the same news stories. And to me, it feels a bit like the movie Groundhog Day. Perhaps some of you have seen that one. Except in this movie, we wake up, we ask ourselves, is college worth it? And then we carry on about our business. But something has changed over the past 5 decades, which is the world of work. Been completely transformed, right? We've seen it digitized, automated, globalized. Yet the blueprint that we have for educational success has largely stayed the same. How do we get here? Well, after World War II, we've had essentially 2 major eras. In the first era, we were very focused on access. So business community came together and said we need more college-educated workers and made a collective call. We then opened the doors wide with the GI Bill, the Higher Education Act, Pell Grants, and so on. And it worked. It was incredibly successful. We went from 2 million students enrolled in college to around 20 million today. But then a couple of decades ago, we realized that just getting in wasn't enough. We had millions of students who were enrolling, but a third of them were dropping out without a degree and often with debt. And so we shifted to a new focus on completion. The goal moved from getting through the front door to the finish line. And we assumed that if we just got people degrees, that the jobs and the careers would follow. But for too many families today, the degree, what is often thought of as a ticket to the middle class, often feels like a high-priced lottery ticket. Right? So you can have a seat in the classroom, you can get that diploma in your hand and still feel stuck at that starting line. And so the question has now changed from will I get in to will I finish to now completion for what? And so in this era, we are now shifting our focus to success beyond completion. This is a new compact between educators and families that's built on a simple but powerful premise, which is that education beyond high school must provide a positive return on investment. And this is the vision that we are working towards in partnership with business, with philanthropy, with policymakers, and many others. And to get there, we think we have to align around these 5 core commitments. 1, employer alignment, making sure that our system design encourages educators to offer and learners to pursue what's valued in the world of work. Work-based learning, scaling opportunities so that everyone has the ability to learn and develop in a workplace setting as they launch their careers. Quality coaching, giving every learner the education to career guidance they need to navigate what is ultimately a maze between education and work. Clear outcomes, giving students and their families reliable information about the actual employment and earnings that are associated with a degree before they sign that loan sheet. Affordability, ensuring that the cost of improving yourself through education is never an insurmountable barrier. So let's then fast forward to 50 years from now and to 2076 and picture a high school graduate. They aren't crossing their fingers and hoping for the best. They have an education to career coach and a thoughtful plan for their future. They know exactly what their credential is worth in the marketplace. And when they walk across the stage, they don't just have a piece of paper. They have a resume with relevant work experience and a clear path to a good job and a career. If we get this right, we're not going to just open doors or hand out diplomas. We'll be delivering on the promise of education to have a real shot at the American dream. And with any hope, we'll stop reading headlines like, "Who needs college?" Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Time now for our final lightning talk. Our next speaker is Ethan Hurd. Ethan Hurd is the Associate Artistic Director of Signature Theater in Arlington. A director, producer, and teacher, he creates theater that builds community and connection. Please join me in welcoming Ethan to the stage to present on art.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here today. Thank you for inviting me. I was born in Washington, D.C., and I saw my first Sondheim production at Signature Theater when I was probably 17 or 18. So it was a joy to come back to Signature 4 years ago and join the senior staff. If you're not familiar with Signature, we won the Regional Tony Award a few years ago, and we pride ourselves as being the best place to experience musicals in America by any measure. We have 2 theaters, a 300-seat space and a 100-seat space. So we really value that intimate connection that the audience can make with our performers. Every audience member is only 10 rows at most away from the stage. We are a $14 million organization, and 75% of our budget goes toward the people who make the art. We're pretty typical in terms of a nonprofit in America, or nonprofit performing arts organization in America, and about 60% of our budget comes from earned income, or contributed income, and 40%, 60% earned income, 40% contributed income. We're maybe unusual in that only 1% of our annual budget comes from the federal government, which has made us a little bit more resilient in these days where the federal government has been pulling back in terms of philanthropy for the arts. Some of the challenges facing the performing arts as a whole are up here on screen. Of course, just paying people has become more expensive in recent years, and the materials we use for our sets and our costumes are costing more and more. Even just the delivery, getting things to our building has become more expensive, as you can imagine. Theaters used to get very large multi-year grants from private foundations like the Ford Foundation or the Mellon Foundation, and some of those foundations have really steered their giving more towards social justice issues, and we haven't been receiving as much of their support recently. Theaters, of course, have a limited number of seats. So while Netflix and Amazon can sort of expand their audience exponentially, we only have a certain number of seats to sell and a certain number of weeks to program per year, and we can only raise the cost of our tickets a certain amount. So we really are relying on philanthropy to close the gap. The closing of the Kennedy Center is, of course, affecting our community. in Northern Virginia, we have colleagues who are losing their job or uncertain of whether this ecosystem can support them in the coming years. So we are seeing talent move away because they just can't put together a career. I also have been noticing that in our political, social, cultural environment, organizations are a little bit more scared about programming cutting edge material or stories that are potentially more diverse. So that's a challenge that we're facing. And of course, the loss of the Washington Post theater critic does affect us in that we have less publicity out there. And we need folks to help us share the news of what we're doing. I so passionately believe that the arts are foundational to a healthy community. They bring us together in space like these. We harmonize literally together. We feel the air together. We share stories. We connect. Theaters, to me, should be at the center of our community in terms of reminding us about our common shared humanity. And it's a place where we get to encounter folks and perspectives that we might not normally encounter. I'm happy to report that signature theater actually is bucking some of the national trends in terms of recent successes. Post-pandemic, a lot of performing arts organizations have seen decreases in their subscribers, but Signature's subscription numbers are up, I'm happy to say. One of our most recent shows was a box office hit. It was the biggest hit for Signature in recent years. Hedwig and the Angry Inch and In the Heights, which are, you might say, more provocative titles in terms of representation. They actually were some of our most successful shows in recent years. And we're reaching new people. I'm very happy about that. And we're expanding our footprint. So down the street from our main building, we have a new education studio, and just 5 minutes away, we have a new production center coming to fruition very soon. Community partnerships are so important to us. I wanted to uplift our recent partnership with Chua Martial Arts that engaged with us over several productions as Tai Chi instructors, lion dance instructors, and performing for our opening nights. I'll come back to some of the innovations maybe when I'm talking with Andrew and Drew. But these were some of the questions I wanted to leave you with. And I'll lift up especially in this era of rapid technological innovation, how do we value in-person live performance? These are my calls to action for you. Please consider coming to check out a show at Signature or another local organization. Tell a friend, make a donation, volunteer, share the word. And these are some of the shows that are coming up at Signature. Thank you. Okay, great.
All right, we're going to do our next panel discussion. Ethan, if you want to come back up here, Andrew, come back up here and join me and Ethan. And same deal as before. You know it, you love it. If you got some questions, please scan the QR code or you can text him in. Your questions were fantastic for the last round. Let's do it again. But I'll kick things off here. Where is the role in kind of bringing back the keynote? Where is the role in maybe this seems a little bit more obvious and apparent in the arts, but still a relevant question in philanthropy, in giving? Where is the need and what's the main access point there? And for somebody, on the education side, what is ultimately the benefit to the end user, to the student, or the family of that student?
Sure. I can say something about show business in America. So I think in contrast to the arts in Europe, theater in America has always been more rooted in a show business model. We expect to make our money through ticket sales, and we value a show's success by its ticket sales. Whereas in Europe, there's a lot more government funding and patronage of the arts built into the culture. So that's something I just like to return to when I think of art for art's sake. I would love to see America grow its culture of giving to the arts in terms of not just producing the blockbusters. We don't just want to see Marvel movies. We want to see those indie movies. and those experimental theater pieces. So I hope that donors will remember that.
How does if somebody's interested in that, where is the access point to that? Is it going to your local theater and giving to the board? Like where does that access point?
I do think it's cultivating in oneself a tolerance and an appetite for risk and experimentation. If we are only buying tickets to the headliners and the most famous people and the biggest budget projects, that's what we're going to get. We have to cultivate a younger generation. We have to cultivate the folks who are experimenting and innovating.
And I would just add on the question of philanthropy. I think we think about it at Strada, perhaps differently. And Paul's comments on the different models, different philanthropic models, really resonated with me. But the way we think about it is, how do we get to large-scale impact? Recognizing that philanthropic dollars are scarce, but the sense of urgency for some of the things that I talked about in terms of millions of lives that we really, it's incumbent upon us to change. And so for us, the model is really thinking about, how can we support research, pilots, test solutions, and then work collaboratively with public and private institutions to bring the necessary resources to bear to solve the problem at a system level. And so obviously, as I said, the philanthropic sector, there's been big cuts, as we know, to public spending, public investment recently. Philanthropy can't make up the difference to that, but we think there is an opportunity for philanthropy to change the conversation.
Where do your perspectives point to shared responsibility across employers, educators, cultural institutions, policymakers, in addition to the philanthropists?
Well, certainly in the performing arts sector, we need to cultivate new audiences from childhood forward. So to me, we need to have arts education, and we need to invite young people into our theater spaces and show them this is for you. There are these barriers, I think, that I used to run an opera company in New York, and there are these ideas that opera is only for wealthy people or super educated people. It's not
Feels
accessible.
stuffy.
Yes, exactly. But as soon as you get a young person into an opera house or a theater, and they get to talk to an opera singer, and they get to go down into the orchestra pit and see and recognize themselves, see themselves in those possibilities, then you have an arts lover for life, really. The bug will bite, is my strong opinion.
I think a lot about it. It's hard to think of an example when we think about our aspiration for positive ROI for every student that wouldn't require shared responsibility across all of the actors that you mentioned. And a lot of it has to do, I think, with changing the kind of mental models that folks have in terms of how they define success. So in the case of educators, they often think about success in terms of persistence and completion, as I kind of mentioned. And so how do we get them to start thinking about employment or moving to an employment standard? Because, of course, any kind of employment is probably too low of a bar. Most people think that if you enroll in a college or a post-secondary program, it's going to give you access to a different set of jobs and careers than you otherwise would have with that education. So part of that involves getting the data in their hands, and then the second piece is helping them leverage that data for institutional change. In the case of employers, we really need them to more actively participate in the education system, certainly communicating their talent needs, validating our collective understanding of what those talent needs are, which is a big challenge, actually. And then the other one that I was just having a conversation in the break is expanding access to work-based learning opportunities, internships, for example, really allowing students and learners to learn, develop, grow in that workplace setting is so important. And then policymakers, really, I would say, thinking about the system and how the system incentivizes or disincentivizes people from pursuing different pathways. As it stands now, perhaps surprising to some, our system actually disincentivizes from pursuing the very pathways that are most in need. in the labor market. Well, it really has to do with the way that we fund higher education. That is, we essentially, when you look across programs, we provide relatively similar support to programs irrespective of how much they cost. And so if you think about programs like nursing, for example, where there's acute needs, engineering is another example, those cost way more to deliver than, let's say, an arts education, not necessarily arts. Arts is a good exception to this, but let's say I study
Some
philosophy. Sure, liberal arts. Let's go with that, where you just need a classroom, a lot of books that are in the public domain.
Sure.
Right, and ultimately, what ends up happening is colleges and universities will restrict access to those programs because they can't afford to enroll more students in them because it's costly to deliver that education.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I didn't need all those gen eds, is what you were saying. I should have been spending my money.
No, quite the opposite. Really, the model for I think what has been in demand over the past several decades, and what will likely continue to be in demand going forward, is what is called a T-shaped learner. So breadth of knowledge, the general education classroom, but then also a depth of expertise in a particular fields that you specialize in, where you can contribute. You can both contribute something uniquely valuable to the economy, but then also communicate and understand that need across different contexts.
Going to go to the iPad now for some questions from the folks listening. What is Signature doing to make it affordable for people of low income levels to attend one of your shows so they can benefit from the arts?
Yeah, I'm proud to say that Signature has about 5 different programs we're always running. So certainly there are student tickets always available. There are rush tickets the day of the shows. You can come and get a discounted seat. There are group discounts. We bring school groups in to our shows. And we're on TodayTix. I don't know if you've heard of this wonderful app that started in New York but has come to other cities. Discount seats are always available on TodayTix. So we're always experimenting with ways to get the word out and invite folks in.
More questions from the audience. I'd like to pick up the thread of apprenticeship and tech education that Lisa brought up this morning. How does that fit into the post-secondary education ecosystem today?
It's a great question. I think in the case of apprenticeship really is the gold standard of work-based learning. It is the model that we should aspire to. I think the challenge with it is defining it, so narrowly in terms of what counts for apprenticeship that employers aren't willing to provide it because it's so costly to do so. In Europe, they do, and many other countries, they can get away with doing apprenticeship because they have very strong regulations and also relationships between employers and the public sector. In the US, if you invest a ton of money training up an individual and then they go and leave to your competitor, you're going to be out of business pretty quick. And so there are challenges with scaling apprenticeship specifically. It does work and it has worked. But really what we need to solve for it, number one, we've got to have, it's not one size fits all. We need multiple models of quality work-based learning that fit different contexts, whether that's education, healthcare, the trades, and so on. But we also need to scale up what we refer to as intermediaries, which are organizations that are trying to solve for the friction between education on the one hand and the employer on the other. So you move from one-to-one relationship between educators and employers to a many-to-many relationship, and that's really the only way you're going to scale.
The threat of training an employee and having them jump ship exists everywhere. What are those regulations, I guess, that are preventing? Is it simply signing a contract that, hey, if we're going to invest 2 years, we need 2 years out of you on the back, or what is?
It is much, much more difficult to end an employment relationship in Germany, both on the side of the worker and the employer, than it is in the US where we have at-will employment, for example. So yes, in terms of contracts, and candidly, the kinds of regulations that would be required to move in that direction here are just not politically feasible. And so we need a different approach. There has been an approach within a system that's similar to ours in the UK and Australia, where they've successfully expanded both apprenticeships and other kinds of work-based learning, but it really is this intermediary model.
This area is fortunate to have a unique depth of talent in the performing arts. A major challenge to small nonprofit arts organizations is finding affordable venues for concerts. Local professional ensembles often compete for space, audience, and funding with nationally, internationally known groups. How can this area better support its own professional artists in finding affordable or free venues, promoting its local talent to audiences, and finding sponsors? These areas are critical to sustaining artists.
It's a really rich and great question, and I'll say that Signature's been on a journey over its 36-year history of finding a balance in terms of hiring local folks and bringing in folks from out of town. We think it is wonderful when there can be cross-pollination. We can't cast usually a full musical from local talent. We want to bring in a couple of people who have been on Broadway or have an amazing, dance background. And so that mixture is always a balancing act. We have a certain number of apartments that we rent, and we're always looking at the budget in terms of, are we bringing in an out-of-town lighting designer or are we hiring a local person? We want to cultivate the local arts community. And I mentioned to a friend that we have a current cabaret series where we are always championing local musicians in that series. But I think, being in DC and the DMV region, there's a real opportunity to be a crossroads for international, national artists and local artists. And the dream is to have venues that can house all of those folks, and the attention that really famous international folks are bringing to a venue can lift up the local folks. And I think if you're familiar with Atlas Performing Arts on 8th Street, they do a wonderful job of cultivating the local community. And I think we have things to learn from them.
Are we seeing, development is all around us all the time in this region. Are we seeing the development of spaces that are smaller, more accessible? I mean, of course, the addition of Capital One over there was fantastic. That's another great space, but that's not, going to be for these same types of shows. Are we seeing new development in a theater that houses 100, 150, 200 seats?
I have to say I don't know the answer to that.
Sure.
But I will answer in a more sort of big picture way, which is I think there can be an emphasis in America, I'll just say generally, on expensive, fancy, nice looking things that are maybe too big than we need and too expensive to run.
Right.
We'll see this in Manhattan where they've built the Perlman Arts Center by the World Trade Center site, the Shed, several new, very expensive to run buildings that have reconfigurable spaces and seating.
Right.
But the crew required to move the seating makes it almost cost prohibitive to change the configurations. So I just am such a champion of a smaller space.
Right.
And of all of us as human beings remembering that spaces of this size and smaller benefit us so much in terms of actual interpersonal connection. And we just need that in this sort of moment of loneliness and isolation more than ever.
Yeah, and I mean, we're seeing, there's the pitch to potentially bring another Sphere to MGM, and, that, again, similar thing. I mean, it's very expensive to put on a show there, and the size of it is in direct competition of a lot of other venues that we already have. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to see it there. I'll be there if it goes there, but, to have a space that provides a little bit more of what some of these questions are getting at, and providing those access points to kids and providing those access points to students, or people who are not doing that as their primary income is maybe just something on the side. How many of your players, is that their full-time gig all the time, or are they working on the side of that?
It's a mixture. I mean, I do think in terms of actors, it's such a hustle to make a full-time life as an actor. So people are often teaching on the side or have a day job that they can do remotely. So that's the dream. I mean, I had never had a full-time job until 4 years ago. I was teaching and running a company and racing around the New England region. So it was just so marvelous to get to Signature, have a parking spot and a desk. And I was like, whoa, I have a landline. I don't use it, but and so I just remind myself, oh, it's a privilege to have health insurance as an artist. It shouldn't be, but that's how America has set it up. So I'd love to see us address that.
What new careers in art and in education may be growing at the intersection of tech and creative in Nova, perhaps related to AI? So that intersection of...
I can't say for Nova specifically, and actually, I think the answer is we don't know yet. I will say we have a survey, a national survey of employers in the field right now where we're asking people who are charged with hiring talent, senior talent leaders, various capacities, what jobs are being created right now. And I think we think a lot more, right, about the jobs that are going away. We kind of have this.
That's where you focus,
deficit,
right? The scary
where's
part.
the harm?
Yeah.
And it's hard for us to actually imagine, the new jobs that are going to be created, even though with every new technology throughout history, they've always led to the creation of new and different jobs that we haven't expected yet. And so I think that's virtually a guarantee that that's going to happen. But I think, people point to things like prompt engineers and the like. But I think we're really just getting started yet, in terms of people figuring out how this stuff works and how to use it effectively or less effectively. We were just talking about this before the panel. And so I think we have to wait and see.
Where do we see it in the art space?
I see it as this two-pronged thing. On the one hand, I want to be a traditionalist and do Shakespeare at the Globe with no technology at all, just in full daylight, And on the other hand, and I think that's valuable and we should keep doing some of that, if not a lot of that. And then on the other hand, I'm so excited to incorporate technology more into live performance, to look at virtual reality options, to not fire all the designers, but have designers work with AI to make even more spectacular things happen. So we need a play space, and I think we need to invite artists into that play space with engineers and scientists and see what is possible.
Is it happening anywhere right now?
Well, I don't know the name of the foundation, but I know there are grants right now that are inviting artists to play with AI and to make projects that show us the future in a way. So I'm excited about that.
Another question on education. Are you concerned that a stress on practical education risks yielding an even less civically informed population? Are you concerned that a stress on practical education risks yielding an even less civically informed population?
Like an emphasis on practical education. I think it's got to be at both ends, and again, I'll just underline the point about T-shaped learners. We need people to essentially get enough general education at the front end of their life to be able to adapt, over the course of their life as they navigate.
To learn how to learn.
Learn how to learn, certainly that's part of it. Developing civic mindedness, and all the kinds of general skills that are transferable across every job and career. Really, you think about critical thinking, communication, problem solving. These are the very skills that employers say are more valued than any other. Even if they're hiring for specialists, that point is so important. That's not going to change. But at the same time, we do need also individuals to cultivate enough specialized skills so that they can get jobs. We can't, it's not enough to be a generalist, typically, at the front end. There are, you can get access to a handful of occupations, but if you really want to get that return on investment, you need to develop specialized expertise.
We're seeing the growth, though, in STEM or other more specialized early ed, right? So where is that kind of broad base, I guess, going? If we're seeing success, right? We're seeing some really bright young kids grow in STEM because they're getting access to it at 5th, 6th grade.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's like I said, it's a both and.
Okay.
I don't think there's any worry, especially as we think about middle
About
school,
focusing
high
in
school,
early, sure.
with allowing people to specialize to some extent in what they're interested in, without leaving behind the general education as we think about communication and also developing skills like quantitative reasoning and critical thinking and so on. Those are core essential agreements. I do think, however, that we ought to think about what is the core curriculum of those general skills that meets the needs of the 21st century, as opposed to thinking about previous versions. And part of that is going to be digital literacy, obviously. Sure. I mean, it's hard to think about a particular job or career that doesn't require some level of digital literacy. I mean, you need it just to live your day-to-day life. And so should that become a core part of the curriculum as well?
And I'll jump in and say, how can we foster digital literacy and not let go of in-person arts literacy, where you're learning emotionally and you're learning how to make music maybe together in a band, or you're learning to step into another character's shoes. I just feel like young people getting sucked into their phones or their computers is such a danger to our society in terms of just empathy and learning. We were talking about compassion. How do we foster compassion in society? To me, that starts with the arts.
100%.
Where is arts in education right now, and in early education? I mean, when I was in 3rd grade, I was learning to play the recorder, right? And don't get me wrong, I've had a couple of really nice offers. Berkeley was like as far as recorder players go. Where we know that the funding has been slipping. Where is it now, and where does it need to be to support a more vibrant arts scene and round out our community?
I mean, to me, it's the more the better, the more the better.
Sure.
I'm happy to say that Signature has a robust presence in Arlington schools, and we interface with thousands of kids per year, both bringing them to Signature, to our shows, bringing them to our classrooms, and going into their classrooms. I don't know the statistics actually in the area in terms of where arts education, what shape it's going in.
Sure.
But I just want to see more of it.
Yeah. And I mean, where are the access points outside of the public education system? I mean, is it still, at Signature, at what age are you bringing somebody in who is not going to get paid, but they're eager to learn?
We had been focusing on high school and college age, and I'm happy to say we just started our middle school programming. We're considering starting even younger because we now have a little bit more square footage to invite families in. And we're thinking about adult learning too, and offering more things on Zoom, because that actually is a place where I think older folks are enjoying our YouTube presence. Instead of coming to our building to maybe listen to a talk, they'll watch it on YouTube. And so we realize, we want to beef that up for them.
Yeah. This is a question, we kind of touched on this with the apprenticeship talk, but how might local businesses adopt/mentor students to support them to complete high school and enter the workforce prepared? I think we think of major corporations, Fortune 500s, who have the capital to invest in maybe retraining workers. But what about smaller businesses or students who are not college educated?
I think for the high school population, the reality is that what most employers are willing to do, and what is honestly realistic in terms of what a high school student can bring to the table, is largely exposure, which is a hugely, hugely important part of navigating education career landscape, right? You really don't know whether something's a good fit for you until you've had enough time living in that context. And so the earlier we can start those exposure activities, the better. And if we can bring big business to the table to offer more of those kinds of experiences, I mean, it's so important. But longer term, we have to think about more intensive kinds of experience beyond just that exposure piece as students move into the post-secondary realm. Actually some experimentation, actually some learning, some skill development, building relationships in that industry as well. And then, finally the sort of formal program where you're actually, there's a pipeline to a job at the end of it.
Right, you know where you're going.
Yeah.
Staying on the topic of high schools, how do we encourage high schools to offer more robust vocational opportunities?
I think a little more straight talk from me. What happened historically is in 1983, the Reagan administration put out a report called A Nation at Risk that said our high schools were failing. We were not competing.
Schools have always been failing.
world.
They're always,
Even before that, but
they're always
this
failing.
was different.
Yes.
The high schools were failing, and we were not competing with Japan. At the time it was Japan, but of course many countries in terms of math skills, all these sort of literacy, college level skills. And so what happened following that was the high school curriculum, this was mentioned in the earlier panel, became almost exclusively college prep. Very, very difficult in any Northern Virginia, any state context, to change the high school curriculum. The high school curriculum is I don't want to say set in stone, but very, very difficult to change. And so what we find is that really high school is about developing those general skills, getting some exposure, both through formal class coursework, as well as work-based learning experiences as well. But really, career preparation, vocational training, as the question acknowledged, has moved into the post-secondary space. And that's actually made a post-secondary education even more critical than it's ever been to getting access to a good job that pays a middle-class wage than it's ever been.
Yeah, I was on this exact stage last month with NVC, and the big concern for CEOs and employers was keeping talent here. This area is so highly educated, and not, yes, major credit to the local universities that we have, but also the people who are coming here maybe in search of their first or second job. What are you most optimistic about education here in Northern Virginia over the next 5-10 years? What is like we should be focused on the good point?
Well, as I think was acknowledged earlier, I think Northern Virginia and Virginia more broadly is really the leader in the country on talent issues. It is the sole state and region with several signature talent and economic development initiatives. And so I think, relative to other regions around the country, you are very well positioned for the coming decade in terms of attracting talent. Everybody is concerned about retaining talent, and that is, especially in the DMV, extremely difficult because there's just so much movement across jurisdictions, across lines, and really we're talking about one economy, 3 jurisdictions. And so I think what you can, I don't know if you can, this exactly answers your question, but I would say as you look to 5 to 10 years, if you could do one thing, for me, it would be define what success looks like over the next 5 to 10 years. What are the business community, philanthropic community, education, et cetera, what is kind of the North Star when it comes to education, workforce, talent issues? And to me, if we could bring those communities together and have a compact that says, we're gonna be focused on delivering positive ROI for everybody in the region, and here's how we're gonna measure it, that would be the one thing.
Ethan, give me 2 shows that you're excited about to see over the next 6 months. One at Signature, one at another local venue. What should I be looking at over the next 6 months that you are most excited about?
Well, I was at Shakespeare Theater last night because we are announcing a co-production with Shakespeare. We're doing a production of Sondheim's Follies, which is a little bit beyond 6 months away. But next spring, we're doing that, and I just wanted to give a shout out to Shakespeare and that partnership, because right now, performing arts organizations more and more are doing co-productions to share costs and to share success. So shouting out to that. And I will give you a signature one just because it's the one I'm directing and I'm selfish like that. I'm directing a 2-person play about a brother and a sister. It's called What Became of Us. It performs in June and July by a wonderful Iranian playwright, Shayan Lotfi. It follows the brother and sister from birth to death. And it's about immigration and assimilation and the American dream.
Love it.
Thank you both, Ethan and Andrew, everyone. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. That was great. Thank you both. All right, now I am pleased to turn the microphone over to the Community Foundation for Northern Virginia's president and CEO, Renee Bing Yancey. Renee? Thank you.
All right, folks. Well, I stand between you and your exit, so I'm going to be brief, but I want to say thank you so much to everyone. Thank you to our Vallow Park colleagues, our sponsors, our partners, Paul, my brother from another mother. I was with you until you started discussing your age of birth. We are definitely a brother from another mother because my mother says, I wish you would stop telling people how old you are because then they will know how old I am. So, but thank you. Yeah, thank you. You've heard about Mother Bing before. So thank you to all of our attendees. And I would be remiss standing here before you today if I didn't thank, and she's going to kick me under the virtual table, my colleague and my predecessor, Eileen Ellsworth. Thank you. It was Eileen's vision many years ago to bring this type of event together where the business community, government, nonprofit organizations, appointed and elected officials, and community members and leaders and philanthropists, and those who care about Northern Virginia would come together to exchange bold ideas, to have conversations that are solutions-based. So for that, I say thank you. Chef's kiss. Thank you, Eileen. And I also want to give a shout out to my allergy sufferers because the struggle is real. Thanks for leaving your house today. So the topics that have been covered and in past Insight Region reports, from housing to children and youth, education, economic mobility, mental health, and running the gamut, have all been touched on in some way today. So the focus on the community-based organizations and the landscape in Northern Virginia, I know that you are leaving this space with more information and insight because of our fantastic speakers, and also thinking about your own grant making and how it is more impactful and taking that long view. You know, we are soon to celebrate as an organization our 50th anniversary in 2028. That's a big deal. So as on the route to 2036, as Paul reminded us, we've got a big milestone along the way. And as we reflect back on today and what we can accomplish together, I encourage you to dig deep, think long, reflective, and consider your grant making so that it is more impactful, and consider the Community Foundation as your hub for informed and long-term philanthropy. Our Community Investment Fund is active. It is supporting the nonprofit community. You saw many of our pillars in place today, the ability to bring people together for the love of Northern Virginia. And the growth of the foundation is exceptional, and we can go even higher, and I know we can do that together. So everyone in this room, no matter how modest you may think of your abilities, we all have a role to play, and encourage you to remain inspired to do so. So today's event, think of it not as a single event, but we'll put a comma at the end of this conversation and keep it going around solutions. The real impact of today begins after you leave, And the impact of my team can't be understated. I really appreciate everyone. And Sari Raskin and Tara Nadell are at the helm. Sari is about to make her transition out onto bold new adventures. We thank you, Sari. We thank you, Tara. And thank you to the entire CF Nova team, of course, board members, alumni. And we are proud to do the work that we do. We thank every single person for being here. Please be sure to take the survey. Thank you for coming. Thank you for engaging. And please pick up our phone calls when we call and ask for your advice and support. So with that, you are dismissed. We hope you will continue to network, and thank